Everybody grab their food and drinks so I can start the party here.
Start the party.
Hi everybody, if you can grab a drink and some food, and I'm just going to say a few words before we listen to our wonderful guest speakers. There should be enough food for everybody. I know it's a tight squeeze. You'll all have to come back. Actually, you know what? Hi, Art. So you know what? David and Porter, you should probably sit here. Yeah, and I'll just have a seat. I'm just going to start. Welcome and thank you for being here. I want to thank Sugar Bush. Sugar Bush has been a sponsor for us for a number of years. and MRB TV next door. So this is all live stream right now. And also Julie and Ray Parker, they're my buddies. They're with me for every show here. So thank you. I'm Sam, the executive director, and with our board, we produce year-round exhibitions and programs from student shows and public events to camps and community partnerships. And it's all possible due to trust and sustained local support. We recently expanded with our art and design shop, which you can't really see here now, offering artist-made goods and education kits, support creative practice, and long-term sustainability. Our art space acts as scaffolding for the production of exhibitions that illuminate social and environmental issues. You're all familiar with Brian Eno. His concept of scenius is a collective creative ecology in which artists, ideas, and communities mutually inform and elevate one another. And I really believe that goes on here in the Valley. So not the rise of a single genius, it's the scenius. So we're creating a scene here, but the rise of an ecology of ideas that make a good vibe happen, a cool scene of many creatives working alongside each other. And so that's really been the inspiration here for me as a director and curator. As you know, most of our exhibits are group shows. We're grateful to be a part of the Valley's cultural and environmental ecosystem. Our work depends on you, your visits, participation, and belief that art matters. We see contemporary art as both a reflection of our time and a catalyst for dialogue, empathy, and action grounded in our relationship with the more than human world. Zero Celsius speaks directly to this idea. It's co-curated with Beth Bingham. The exhibition explores winter through cultural, intimate, and environmental lenses. We're honored to present work from 3 particular artists that we had to, it took a long time to get them on board with us from the snow show, Winter Now, at the Sun Valley Museum of Art. So, and with them alongside the other invited and devoted artists responding to climate change and the shifting experience of winter. So briefly, I want to highlight these 3 artists. Sofia Jaramillo, she's the artist right here, the photographer. She reimagines ski culture to reflect inclusion and shared outdoor identity. We have Brad Johnson right now in the other room going on. He gives us a cinematic tour of Earth's dynamic terrain, where geology, ice, and altitude collaborate into shifting topographic scape maps. He combines archival imagery, data, photos from various vantage points through ice caves, glaciers, and volcanoes. Somehow, he reveals the interior and exterior in relationship. So please go in there, if not tonight, come back and see this very cool digital room we've got going on there. Rob Reynolds brings us to the Arctic Greenland. So he's a filmmaker. He's also in the other room, where his film engages the Inuit concept of Sila, the interconnected force of air, weather, spirit, and change. And Sila invites us to reconsider our alignment with the natural world. Every person who walks through our doors contributes to the life of this place. If this work in 0 Celsius resonates with you, I invite you to stay connected. Return for future programs, bring a friend, visit the shop, or consider supporting us in a way that feels meaningful to you. And now, please join in welcoming our guest speakers, David Goodman and Porter Fox, award-winning journalists, authors, and skiers whose writing brings landscape, climate, and place vividly to life. Thank you, David and Porter, for being part of us. There you go. So,
well, it's great to see a lot of friendly faces and new faces here in Mad River Valley. I've traveled here all the way from Waterbury, which today was a beautiful and snowy and stormy drive, but I know that Porter has appreciated the snowstorm on the highways coming up from near Kingston, New York, and had a slower go of it. So I'm glad that he made it. But I want to just kind of set the context for our conversation tonight. And that is some things we've learned just in the last month. Last month, a study came out about winter on Mount Mansfield that was conducted by scientists from UVM and University of British Columbia. Since 1965, winter, the snow cover on Mansfield, the amount of time that there has been snow cover on Mansfield has shrunk by 3 weeks. We know winter is getting shorter, but this is actually, that's dramatic. That's, if we think about when there's reliable skiing, if it's somewhere around Christmas to somewhere to the end of March, we lost about a quarter of it there. Then also within the last month, the study came out from NOAA declaring, and I saw this headline and it made me do a double take. New England is the fastest warming region on Earth.
Wow, really?
For a variety of reasons, this little pocket of the world is seeing the acceleration of climate change in incredibly fast and dramatic fashion. We've seen other studies that by the year 2040, there will be no ski areas in southern New England. So all those places clinging to life in Western Mass and Connecticut are just not going to be able to pull it off anymore unless snowmaking, unless it is done with something other than water and cold air. So against that backdrop and the very real threat that the thing we love to do is endangered. We as winter lovers, skiers, or whatever you like to do in the winter, are the canaries in the coal mine. And there's no canary been singing louder than my friend Porter Fox here. And Porter and I got to know each other many moons ago as writers for Powder Magazine. So took our both of us sort of launched our writing careers, writing about the thing we love most about. Porter actually was an editor at Powder for 17 years and was my editor for a time. But Porter has gone on to do some really remarkable narrative journalism in a series of books that he began writing about a dozen years ago. So in 2013, Porter wrote the book Deep, The Story of Skiing and the Future of Snow. And in 2018, he came out with Northland, a 4,000-mile journey across America's Forgotten Border, which was named a Book of the Year by the New York Times Book Review. In 2021, he published The Last Winter, The Scientists, Adventurers, Journeymen, and Mavericks Trying to Save the World. And 2 years ago, he came out with Category 5, Superstorms and the Warming Oceans That Feed Them, which was nominated for the 2024 Pulitzer Prize in Nonfiction. One of the things that I love about Porter's writing is that he writes about it from the vantage point that's very familiar to us. He loves, he is a lover of winter. He is a skier. He's not a scientist. So it's very much the lens through which any of us might come at it, but he has the gift of really being one of the great narrative storytellers that we have in the country. And we're so lucky that he A, loves to ski, B, cares about climate change, and melds the two in remarkable fashion. So Porter, I thought I'd start by asking you, what does your love of cold places, what's the backstory of that?
I think everyone here probably has a similar story. And thank you very much for the intro. And thank you, Beth and Mad Arts for having us here. This is a great crowd. Hard to pull a great crowd for climate change talks I've found over the last 15 years. but it's real and it's in our faces. And I think certainly David and I and many of you got pulled into this winter world just by the fascination of it. It's such an exotic place. There's nothing like it. The fact that you can put on a couple boards on your feet and go screaming down it at 60 miles an hour adds to the fascination. But honestly, it's even more incredible on the way up when you're hiking or skinning and you have these quiet moments and see sundogs whipping off the top of a peak, and you see glaciers when you're on a glacier. You see just incredible snowfall. I lived out in Jackson Hole for 5 years and was just really lucky to experience some of the most incredible winters I've ever seen in my life. Then, of course, working for Powder Magazine, the job is for David and I to go to the most far-flung place you can find and try to ski it. And that took me anyway to Baja, Mexico, to Turkey, to Japan, to South America, Bolivia, Peru, Asia, all through Europe, Arctic Circle. Where did we not go? I skied in Morocco.
So that's why I had to go ski in South Africa, because you skied everywhere else that I was trying to get an assignment for.
You got some good gigs. You got some very good gigs. But I'll tell you what.
Thank you for that. 30 years later.
Very good gigs and very great stories. He was very easy at it. Thank God. So many other powder writers took a bit of time. But at any rate, it was just fascination. And I think naturalists are like that as well. It doesn't have to be snow. It can be the forest. It can be the ocean. It can be geology. It can be really the magic of this planet and universe and all of the kind of various climates that we have around the world, and how that all comes together is this incredibly beautiful cadence and this incredibly beautiful, almost like a mirage, like how it happens. And so, I always come back to, that's kind of what pulled me in there and pulled a lot of people in is the fascination of it and the exotic kind of nature of snowscapes and whatnot. But once you start studying it, you start to realize that, climate change isn't something that's just happening right now. Climate change has been happening for 3.5 billion years on this planet. And there's been various natural causes typically that pushed things in one way, pushed them in another way. But after they were pushed, it's the recoil from that, the kind of geophysical fallout of that climate change that is so incredibly fascinating. When Earth was a snowball, completely surrounded, completely covered with glaciers, and only maybe a bit of open water, say, around the equator, why didn't it just stay like that? Well, it didn't stay like that because once you cover, all of the land masses and stop runoff into the ocean, the overturning circulation current of the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific start to very efficiently transport heat around the world the way they didn't before. Right now, we have the opposite of that happening. We have a lot of ice melting, and we have a lot of fresh water pouring into those same oceans around the origins and kind of like runnels where those currents move, and the fresh water blocks that, and it slows down the overturning current. And now all of a sudden, heat isn't efficiently being moved from the equator up, coolness from the North Pole down, and suddenly we have another climate change that typically will go in reverse. And it has done this for forever and ever. And that's what really was the second piece that really drew me in, was learning that it wasn't as simple as just dumb humans using a 10, 15,000-year-old technology to move their cars around. It was really more of Earth as this Rubik's Cube of a kind, and it's like these little puzzles that it operates on, and they're really fascinating to get into. So that's how the science kind of came into it.
Well, let's continue on that theme, because A place that has been unfortunately in the news a lot of late is Greenland, a place that you ventured to tell part of the story of the last winter. And one of the things that was very memorable in there was your description of how the melting fresh water from Greenland, how it is affecting ocean currents and the Gulf Stream, how that's affecting storm creation, extreme weather. But you note in there that the last time this happened was after the last ice age. So this is the interval we're talking about. These are the milestones we're reaching. So tell us a little bit, since President Trump now wants to acquire Greenland, and I guess make it part of Vermont or something, or maybe he thinks Vermont is Greenland, in which case this will all be over. Just tell him you already own it, and we'll take whatever you give us.
That's the best plan I've heard yet. Just trick him.
Send him a few, photos from the Mad River Valley and tell him, look, it's ours, and we just move on to the next catastrophe. So tell us about Greenland and why it matters, and not just here, but even in like Africa.
It matters because it is the last bastion of ice in the northern hemisphere, and Arctic obviously is the other, that is holding our climate kind of by a shoestring. And it's holding it for now because the full melt hasn't happened yet. It is likely past the point of no return, and it would be pretty hard to stop that. I'm not sure how much you've read about how the melt is happening. It's also really fascinating. It's not just what you would think of watching a snowbank melt. It has to do with underwater tunneling, and it has to do with seawater coming in beneath the glacier and coming up into it and increasing the melting. But what you do see when that fresh water comes out is just between, I would say, Greenland, the UK, and maybe 250 miles south of there is this zone in which that water typically gets so heavy and it gets so saturated with salt, in fact, that it drops down to the bottom of the ocean. And as it drops down, it pulls down more water behind it, just like anything in physics would. So you have this downward turning. This is the overturning current that kind of is the thermostat of the entire planet. And when fresh water floats on top of salt and it stops that, it just stops that transformation happening. All of a sudden, the river is not plummeting down this waterfall. It's kind of hitting a blockade and it's slowing down, which, lo and behold, in my next book, which originates with the sailors that are sailing around the world, one of the things they noticed in the 1970s was that they weren't getting the slingshot effect of the Gulf Stream when they were doing an Atlantic crossing. Usually when they got south of Greenland, they would get just the tail end of the Gulf Stream would give them an extra 2 knots, which on a boat is it's like a race car. It really, 2 knots over 14, 20 days is like a lot of extra free ground, but they weren't getting it. It suddenly was down to a 1/2 knot, 1 knot, and whatnot. And that's what launched that book, Category 5, was actually talking to these guys that anecdotally observed the slowdown of the AMOC. They anecdotally observed the changing of trade winds that hadn't changed in probably 100,000 years. And all of a sudden, it's moving just subtly, degree by decade. And so I took that story of them and then applied the science to it and then kind of showed the big picture of how those changes are affecting our world.
And if you detect that Porter has more than a passing relationship with the ocean and knowledge of it, you open Category 5 by describing this harrowing scene of a sailor on the Atlantic Ocean nearly capsizing by the powers of the currents and the ocean that he did not understand. And you wait till the end of that story to tell us that sailor was you. Your dad was a notable boat builder. Porter grew up on Mount Desert Island. talk about your relationship to the ocean and how that's kind of driven your interest in this.
It's just so similar to the snow thing. We went into the backcountry because it was just wild and alien and incredible. And prior to that, I would say that 20 years prior to that, when I was living on the island, I was working on boats all the time. But boats were a place that we could get away from our parents. We could get away from our teachers. We could go out into this really wild realm and explore. And I mean, since I was 5 years old, we were rowing dinghies out to little islands and setting up camps and forts and searching for animals on the tidelands and whatnot. And so over time, I was working as a deckhand and racing sailboats, and then as a captain, and I kind of was pushing farther and farther offshore, and just falling so deeply in love with that landscape, which is so similar to a landscape on a snowfield. It's crazy. You have the waves and everything, and it's a little slower than skiing. It's tortuously slow, my wife says. But it is a great way to see the world. And we haven't sailed around the world, but we've sailed all over the world. We've sailed through the Mediterranean. We've sailed all across the eastern seaboard and sailed down in the Caribbean. And it's such an incredible way to just go places. I don't want to get in an airplane and just go to a place, I mean, we do, but I don't really want to get on a bus and just go to a place. If you can be the locomotion, kind of be on it, it's just incredible. So that's what kind of pulled me into both of those realms.
So let's talk about your most recent book, Category 5. We in Vermont are no strangers to the superstorms that are coming through and causing incredible damage here in the Mad River Valley. The flooding that's occurred, in 2011 we had Tropical Storm Irene, which was described as a 500-year flood that just wasted big parts of the valley, Waterbury, other downtowns. 2023, the capital city of Montpelier, inundated, flooded, still recovering. That was supposedly a 100-year storm, which was followed a year later by a 100-year storm that again inundated many of our towns. So what is the science behind the creation of this extreme weather, and why are we seeing 100-year storms now every couple of years?
The label doesn't fit anymore. There's storms. They're going to be coming much, much faster. There's more heat in the atmosphere, and it's like anything. You add energy to a closed system, the energy has to come out somewhere. It could be electricity, it could be heat, it could be wave action. It's the same. It is a massive amount of energy, and a hotter atmosphere holds more water, so you see more rainfall. A warmer atmosphere has vastly more convection, which is heat bubbles shooting up through the just shafts of hot air coming up. That's how you get a thunderstorm. That's how you get squalls. Most of it originates in the ocean, which was something I didn't realize. Almost every drop of rain, every breath of wind, the ocean really is the mother of all weather. And that's why I started there on the ocean and started tracking it. But once I got into the labs at GFDL in Princeton and ECMWF in Great Britain, these people that have these incredibly complex models, they're really mathematicians, they're not really forecasters. And these huge supercomputers are really learning within a 1 kilometer grid how exactly it's happening, where it's happening, and what might happen after that. So we've all seen it, and we see it's getting really much worse, much faster than expected. I've clocked 60-mile-an-hour winds at my house in the Catskills. We have a little weather station up there, which just about blew it off. It is terrifying how powerful this severe weather has gotten. But at GFTL, this incredible scientist enlightened me to my favorite fact from the entire book. I'm always looking for some upside, like some good news within the climate world. And he and his wife had essentially created a formula that showed that every degree of temperature that happens, every degree of rise will be met with a certain amount of increased velocity, winds, rainstorms, hurricanes, tornadoes, everything, what have you. And it affects the severe weather on planet Earth within about a year of that bump in temperature change. So they reversed it and said, well, what happens if we dropped, if we lost a degree, if we actually went backwards and sequestered enough CO2 and whatever we got to do, if that happens, within a year, you would see that same amount kind of taken out of storms. The severity would drop by, I'm not sure what the percentage is, but say 2%, something like that. And every degree therefore that drops down, you're seeing storm activity go back. If we drop CO2 to 350 ppm like it was in 1985, we're going to see storms like we had in 1985. It literally changes that quickly. Within a year, you see it actually happen in the real world, which was finally a reason to talk to folks like you and say, this is attainable. Like there's so much about climate change that has momentum that will go for thousands of years, but there's also certain parts of it that can be manipulated, changed, kind of toned down in the very near future. And that was something to me that made it worth just trying to get people to vote, trying to get people to get off fossil fuels, trying to every little fraction that we can do, you will see in your backyards with those wind gusts, with those crazy squalls that come through. And it kind of gave me some hope that if we could see that, it might get people to kind of engage more.
One of the kind of anecdotes that you tell in Category 5, I'm not sure, Category 5 or the last winter, was you had traveled, you had been dog sledding in Greenland, and you came, right after you came back, COVID hits. And you notice that the same people who were denying climate change were out there denying COVID and then becoming, fighting the vaccines. What's the connection?
It's our brains. It's how our cognition evolved. We evolved to jump out of the way of a charging tiger. We didn't evolve in a way that we could jump out of the way of a hurricane or even understand really what's happening there. We are literally hardwired for close encounter danger. And I'm sure we are evolving little by little, but as of now, we are still, if you drive by a deer, you'll notice it's almost, I can't remember what it is, but it's somewhere right at around 100 feet when you're driving by a deer in a car where it will bolt. And it's almost exactly the same for every single deer because they are hardwired for that. And we were hardwired in the savannah to not get eaten by tigers and other close threats like that. This existential threat, it's very hard for the human brain to just wrap their heads around it. It's actually really hard to understand it, to believe it, to think about it on a daily basis. Like, oh, I'll think about it tonight. I'd say tomorrow by lunch, we're just back to our lives. We're kind of doing our thing. So we're not going to change our brains, but I think we can change the way that we're delivering this information, make it a little less scary, a little less preachy, a little less kind of like, this is the right way to live, what are you doing, a little less critical, and point out all of the positive things that can happen. If we figure out climate change, we're not just figuring out how to stop the Earth from warming, we're figuring out how to create a growing season in Malawi. Like we're figuring out how to stop deforestation in New England. Like we're learning how to stop the pine beetle infestation in the US West. Like so much of it is hinging on this climate that if we can unfurl that and start to understand it, you could spread precipitation around the world more equitably. You could not geoengineering I'm talking about, but certainly understand that system better. And really kind of make this incredible planet even easier for us to live on.
I'm sure that in your travels, you encounter climate skeptics. How do you talk to them? How do you make a dent?
There's fewer and fewer, I'll tell you that. And I live in a pretty little Republican bastion of the Hudson Valley, and they're farmers. Like, they see it. It's undeniable, and they want help with it. But to really break through, it's always at a personal level. It's just like when David and I go out on a story, you walk into a stranger's house and you're like, tell me everything about your personal life. And that person's like,
I never do that.
while you're standing up, you're chit-chatting and you're like, tell me your deepest secrets. But it's a personal connection, and you make a personal connection, they start to ask the questions instead of.
Do you feel like something you've said or written has kind of broken through for somebody who was not inclined to agree with you before?
Yes, I did a gig in the Upper West Side of Manhattan that was filled with oil executives. It was one of the weirdest nights of my life. And I took my reading, and there was silence. And then I talked, and I talked to these folks, and they had so many questions. Like, they really wanted to know, because it could be as simple as they had a lot of money at stake. Maybe they were actually interested in protecting their grandkids' lives. I don't know. They had so many questions. I don't think there's as many climate deniers out there as everybody thinks there are. I think there are a lot of frightened people out there that are terrified and don't really know what to do. And that's why we simplify it and we say, stop burning gas. That's it. There's so much ancillary kind of efforts going on right now. But as our neighbor Bill McKibben likes to remind everyone, it all comes back to burning gas. And I know, even us in this room, we're burning propane, we're burning gasoline, we are using heating oil, some folks, driving cars around, getting trucks to deliver Amazon to us. We're all doing it, And that is the one thing that I've been pushing recently in this Trump era, is not buying oil from these people is now an act of protest. Our votes are what I always used to say is like, this is what we need. We need to vote, and we need more people to vote. National policy change is the only way to catch up with this late thing. That's not going, maybe in the future, it's not going so well right now. What we can do is in tiny incremental ways, we can stop buying oil from these assholes, and we can start to live a modern life. This is an ancient technology. If we all drove electric cars and somebody pulled in a gas car here and said, we got this new thing, it's so cool. You have to put this toxic chemical into it, and it's going to spew toxic chemicals out the back, and you have to stop all the time and fill it up. You have to get your oil changes, and you got to change your transmission fluid, and it's probably going to rust out in about 8 to 10 years in Vermont and Maine. Nobody's going to buy that car, but we're stuck with that right now. And our more efficient and certainly not perfect versions of that, of energy generation, of transportation, of whatever, is something that we can all push for. Consumers drive this country 100%. Our economy is us. So we have that power. And however you want to exercise that, exercise it. But I think we should be doing something.
How do you connect the climate crisis with the political crisis we see now, the rise of authoritarianism and fascism here in our own country? What's the connection?
I mean, there's been a connection between climate and politics forever, going back thousands of years. And it's typically relating to a heat wave killing the crops. You kill the crops, people are starving, they will. Or prices go up. The ice age after that moment, in the 1600s, I think it was. And the little ice age just devastated crops throughout Europe, and prices go up, and now you're seeing revolution in France, you're seeing it in Germany or Germanic area in Bavaria. And that was all triggered by climate. So much over the years has been triggered by climate. You go back to the Egyptians, you go back beyond that. And so I would say that, it's in these rough political times, climate could hurt us, climate could save us in a way. If you have a fascist person who's unwilling to leave office and is going to stick around, but all of a sudden, our crops are failing, or there's not enough water coming out of the Rockies to fill the, Lake Mead and whatnot, all of a sudden, people are going to point fingers there. So it can kind of go either way, but there is a very strong connection for sure.
So I have thought of you, so as I mentioned, one of Porter's books called Northland is about his 4,000-mile journey along the world's longest undefended border. That is the one an hour north of here with Canada. And now you're seeing this, this attack on Canada, this essentially kind of militarization, even if it's through electronic means or other, of that border. What's going through your mind right now? You have, you did it by foot, by canoe and freighter, every means possible. You have the most intimate view of probably anybody of what that border is like.
It's a mess. It's unmarked, undefended. I often say I didn't, on that whole trip, which took a couple years of intermittent travels, I often didn't know what side of the line I was on. It was just like you have to maybe talk to someone and then they wouldn't really know, and it's very, very loose. There is not nearly the number of people coming over the northern border, but if you look at kind of the bad stuff coming across the border, it rivals the southern border significantly. But also, those are like the headlines. The reality is that in the old days, families were spread all across that border. Some lived in Canada, some lived in Maine, some lived in Ontario, some lived in North Dakota. And the line was loose because it really was kind of it was just I don't know how to say it. It was just like it was 200 years ago. So Trump's threats, I mean, I'll tell you this, I am certain that whoever's whispering in his ear is looking at what Canada has that America wants, which is typically natural resources, water, for sure, land, perhaps, Greenland, the rare minerals. Those are the things that folks are going after, but there will come a point at which you've reached the end of the line and you've gotten all the stuff you wanted and we're still burning up. So it's a bit of a fool's errand, and I think it's a little bit of bravado by him, just sort of trying to play fascist.
So you and I have been talking about, these conversations are happening as journalism itself is in free fall. Trump has branded journalists the enemies of the state. The world, the industry that we began in with great hopes many years ago it's kind of vaporizing. We have major institutions. Last week, the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, after over 100 years of publishing, is going out of business, and this is happening every week in America. 2 newspapers cease publication. And so we have this expanding news deserts throughout the country. And these are places where there is no source of independent news, leaving people, at the mercy of propagandists, of, bad actors, Russian trolls, and the things that pass as news here, but are actually just propaganda. What do you think the future of the world of journalism is? Something we've both been doing for a long time, but not so sure. And you teach people who go into journalism as well at Columbia.
Yeah, I mean, there are more outlets now than there ever were before. Tiny little websites.
There might be 20 outlets represented
Exactly.
in this room. That's right.
Right. Every Facebook account, every Twitter account. People are reading more now than they ever have. That's for sure. They're reading on their phones all day long. And it's a different kind of storytelling. It's a 150-word story, or it is a story in pictures or in film. So it is still there, and it is still our sort of means of communication. I just find in so many things like this, there is this sway of back and forth. It goes all from classified ads, all go to Craigslist, and then Craigslist dies. And then what happens? Now they're all going, I don't even know where, Facebook Marketplace, I guess, for now. Like, things shift constantly. Nothing is forever. And if journalists can just keep digging and keep trying to do their jobs, there are outlets for them. They're just not getting paid. That's the problem. And that's not.
I noticed.
And honestly, that's where philanthropy comes in. Like that's where I'm lucky enough to be a McDowell fellow, and I go to McDowell and work my ass off. It's so miserable, but the place is magical. But you do so much work in such a short period of time. But they've harnessed this philanthropic money to support not just journalists, dance, theater, poetry, everything. And it's all there, and it's all happening by the generosity of tax-deductible dollars. And I feel like that is taking hold more and more. Not just philanthropy, but other outlets are popping up, and those outlets actually can have a much wider reach than what we ever had at Powder, or any outlet other than, say, the New York Times or big publications like that. So I think there's hope there, but they need some help.
Well, I'll put in a plug. Where I see the hope in that world is in, we have in Vermont, VT Digger is actually one of the national models, pioneers in nonprofit digital news. I host a podcast for them that I've interviewed Porter on a bunch of times called The Vermont Conversation. Local news needs support, and local news is the bulwark against propaganda and misinformation. Because, it's optional for you to read about the horrors of the world, but you know that you're going to read the Valley Reporter every week. You're going to, hopefully you check Vermont Public or VT Digger or 7 Days to know what's going on in the state. But these places are also hanging on by the fingernails. And it's something very concrete and very local that you can do and must do and support your local media. Because I do believe, I was doing a public conversation with the new editor of VT Digger, and she was talking about rebuilding trust in news begins at the local level. The incredible manipulation and misinformation that we get from national actors is countered by the local news. You know who was at the school board meeting that happened. You know that if you went to the select board meeting, who was there and who wasn't. And it's very hard to misrepresent what happens locally. And so I appreciated her take. She's a Pulitzer Prize winning reporter from the New York Times and is now working here in Vermont and drawing a lot of her colleagues to VT Digger. It's an interesting and important thing that we're not helpless. We can rebuild and push back and fight back in these, as you say, there are many new opportunities to tell stories and report news, and we have to support them.
Yeah.
The old model, ads and such. All right, so.
And don't forget, I'm sure you saw this in the Times, Camden, Maine, someplace in New York, I can't remember where very heavy hitter editors from Washington Post and another major newspaper moved, relocated, rebuilt the local paper, and turning it into award-winning journalism, all at the local level, rebuilding their headquarters. I don't know where their money's coming from, but it doesn't matter. They're doing it. and it's inspiring, and I feel like it will likely be profitable and be a real flagship that small communities can try to emulate.
Well, interesting, Lee, this Geeta Anand, the new editor of BG Digger, was telling me a lot of her colleagues, she was a foreign correspondent for the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, a lot of her colleagues are clamoring to join her in Vermont. So it's not hard, but don't take it for granted. I mean, this is really a place where if you don't support your local news, no one will, and you can support it. You can shore it up. You can make sure that misinformation and propaganda stops here. Finally, Porter, you've seen a lot of the kind of unraveling of things and chronicled them around the world. What gives you hope in this moment?
Well, this, people being interested, engaged. And this is going to sound corny, but just I believe in the human spirit. I mean, we've come a long way. And we are so incredibly innovative and smart. I talk to these scientists. I walk out of an hour-long interview with a scientist that's working in a supercomputer in Great Britain, and it's like he hasn't spoken a word of English in that hour. It's so dense and complex, and what he has done is created a complete digital replica of planet Earth, where you can poke it in one spot with, say, a little extra heat here and see exactly how the ramifications spread around the world for the next 150 years.
Wow.
We can do that. We have done the most incredible things. And I know as a fact that we can handle this climate change situation we're in, a lot of difficult times that we're in right now. I know we can handle that, and I think we will. It is a little more about figuring our identity out, figuring out our politics, and really dropping the us versus them mentality, because we're all being affected in the same way.
Well, let's turn to some questions from the audience. You are, of course, amongst the smartest people in the world in the Mad River Valley, as I believe they would be the first to tell you. Questions from you all? I'm going to go with behind Carrie there.
I have a question about geoengineering. You just like little glanced off it, and there's seeding. There's where do you land on that subject?
Tricky. Yeah, you got to be very careful. There are some very, very promising projects. Like I wrote about one in Category 5, ocean iron fertilization, which has been on the map forever, but they're learning how to scale it. They're kind of learning how, in a nutshell, algae on the surface absorbs a tremendous amount of CO2 from the atmosphere, and it sinks in various ways. My daughter's favorite way is by fish poop going to the bottom, which is actually about 30% of our CO2 in the air every year. That's how it gets to the bottom through the biological carbon cycle. But they have ways of enhancing. If iron is kind of one of the essential minerals for life, so if you spread regular old iron dust over the ocean, you'll see algae within a matter of hours almost, and you can create essentially a forest that is drawing down CO2, releasing oxygen, drawing down CO2, breaking the C from the O2, holding on to the C, releasing the O2, and then you sink it mechanically. And it has a really terrific promise, but they're still studying side effects and what could that possibly be? Could something worse come out of that? We don't know yet. I mean, they've been working on it for a long time. But it seems, quite possible. There's a lot. There's the little mirrors that Bill Gates wants to put up in the atmosphere that you can control with a remote control and reflect sun at will. There's cloud seeding to create more cloud cover that also reflects solar radiation. I mean, sadly, snow was our solar radiation reflector for, I don't know, the last 3 billion years. But snow is becoming quite scarce, certainly at poles. So we're losing that albedo, they call it, that reflective power. So there's a lot of it out there. And as a last resort, sure, I'd rather just stop burning fossil fuels. I think that's probably an easier way. Or you know what it will likely be is a blend of all of that, just a little bit of this and a little bit of that. But it is a problem that kind of grows faster as it grows bigger. So the time is definitely now.
Carrie, you had a question.
Yes, thank you for coming. My question is, how do you respond to a common reaction you hear in Vermont? Is that Vermont is too small to really make a difference in trying to reduce carbon in the atmosphere? How would you respond to that kind of reaction?
You're a leader and people follow. People love to follow. It's kind of what we do. So if you're doing it, you're doing it in a cool way, not in the preachy way, not in the, holier than thou way. This is just what we're going to do. Man, it has huge repercussions. Not everyone wants to be like you. I mean, we've seen that in the skiing world. We were just talking about backcountry uphill ski resorts, and all of a sudden someone finally did it, or the glading, someone finally did it. And then everyone else is like, wow, that's really cool. Let's do that. Yeah. And then everyone starts doing it. So we're not all going to do the same thing at the same time around the world. No way. But you can look at what's happening in Nigeria right now with solar and be just completely blown away. Like, wow, they're almost off grid at this point. You can look at various projects that are happening around the world, and it's super inspiring. So make Vermont that. Be like, we're the first state to be completely carbon neutral. And now New York is going to be like, oh shit, that's what we were going to do. I forgot. Maybe not Kathy Hochul, but maybe her successor. But someone has to just do it. Could just be right here in this parking lot. Just start somewhere. And we've seen that in so many things in humanity, where just that one person kind of breaks through and is like, I did it. And now everybody wants to do it.
Yes.
Thank you so much for this dialogue. It's just amazing. And the positivity that you bring is really, you've talked a lot about carbon and climate change. And I'm just wondering if you can sort of inject that same positivity in what you've seen that's helpful in the world when it comes to biodiversity and development. And like just the number of people that are on the planet and the loss of forested lands and things like that.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah, I'm just like, I'm so I'm like, say something about that.
I will, since you offered, I was in West Africa looking at the issue of biodiversity and efforts there to preserve it. And if we care about preserving biodiversity, we have to make it economically advantageous for the places in the world that still have the biggest tracts of undeveloped land, the Amazon. We can't just wall these places off and tell them because it's for your own good, because there's tremendous pressure to survive, to hunt, and all these things. And in places in West Africa, the industrialized world has had to invest to make it worth their while, because they're being asked to pay for our crimes and transgressions. And they are very clear. They understand that. Why can't we hunt in this nature preserve? Why does it need to be? But if there's a reward for that the industrialized world is providing, it can work. We can preserve the lungs of the world in the Amazon. We can do these things, but we can't just do them by roping them off. And there have been successful models of this. So that would be one thing I would say.
Yeah.
What do you say?
Well, it's just we're the consumers. The consumers run the world. So if you demand it somehow, some way, then it can happen. But David's right. It has to be any type of conservation, any type of, kind of repairing or protecting biodiversity, like there does have to be like a price tag there somewhere, because that's just our currency. That's how people think. And that's how the big players really think. But it's doable. It's all very doable. There's some pretty amazing things happening in the Amazon right now. The new book I'm working on is about forests, which I've realized is just yet another one of these alien landscapes that we disappear into. There is some really incredible stuff happening there. So there are smart minds working on that question.
Yes.
I was just gonna ask you, what role do forests play in climate change?
I'm learning everything. I mean, I'm not learning everything. They're also drawing down 35% of the CO2 that we emit a year. But it's so far beyond that. Before our first forest on this planet, there was so little oxygen on the planet. There was no fires. There had never been a fire on Earth until forests showed up and started emitting this absolutely unbelievable amount of oxygen into the air and created the atmosphere that we have now. The Earth wasn't ready for that at the time. Oxygen was poisonous to most single cell creatures that were on the planet then. It was a mass extinction, and then things kind of rebounded and regrew with the ability to thrive off of oxygen. So they're everything. And they're one of those tipping points that if that were to go, you kind of get to a point where trees are not drawing down enough CO2 to keep trees cool enough to survive. So it's this self-propagating thing where all of a sudden it's gotten so hot that species are dying. And we see that already here in New England. But you see it all over the world, and then you pass this critical point at which so many trees have died that the temperature is just spiking in a very crazy way. So we're near that threshold. We're near it with ice. We're near it with the trees. It's definitely been go time for all of this. Yeah. Oh, sorry, you're supposed to pick.
Yes. That's terrific to meet you and hear your thoughts. I don't drive an EV, but I know a lot of people do, a lot of friends. And it seems to be an attractive thing to do in the path of reducing our carbon footprint for each of us. As production of common sense electricity increases, it's even more sensible. I sometimes think that riding around in EVs and electric buses, school buses, now semi-trucks, is sort of like methadone. It's taking care of the symptom, but it's not dealing with the problem.
Yeah.
At some point, we have a problem with transportation, and when you live in a rural place, you kind of, everybody in this room drove here in a car.
Yeah.
Whether it's an EV or not. Has that come through in the work
Yes.
you're doing, and what are you seeing? I mean, I'd love to have an EV pickup truck, but I can't afford the ones they're making now. I'm a builder, so I need a truck.
Yeah.
What thoughts have you on that?
I mean, you look at the undersea mining, the cobalt industry, it's toxic, it's horrible. Look at nuclear power. It's making a comeback because it doesn't have CO2 emissions. And it's scary. But we kind of got ourselves into this pickle. We've known about climate change since the 1860s. And I think there have to be some stopgap measures to get us to that place where we have hydrogen cell energy in our cars, and the only waste, the only pollution is water vapor that comes out of it. Like, we're just not there yet, but it doesn't mean we should drive our gasoline cars until we get there. The cost of EVs is outrageous. It's like a rich person's toy. We have EVs because we're so into this, and I just have for my kids. I just feel like I cannot. I've ripped all the fossil fuel anything out of my whole property. I just had to do it. But you go to China, you can get an EV for $3,000 and drive it for 20 years. So they did it wrong. They made it a luxury item. And it shouldn't be a luxury item, whether we got to subsidize it or help with the R&D or I don't know what. It ought to be a, $20,000 basic, Ford Pro that does no bells and whistles, but it's powerful as hell. And, it's, again, eventually could be fueled in an even better way. But I think it's stopgap measures for everything right now. Because we're at, they put a 10-year timeline on these tipping points 7 years ago. So not a lot has changed in the 7 years. So I think that was kind of a mistake to put that tipping point on there because after 10 years we're like, all right, well, we're screwed anyway. But that's not the case. I think there will be some stopgap measures, but the goal is to create energy responsibly, like you said. And man, if we can do that, drive as far as you want, do whatever you want. It's not killing the planet. That would just be incredible. Like sailing. I love sailing. Doesn't burn anything.
Sparky, you had a question.
I was wondering, how do you make a choice between, let's wait, we want to walk out of here and do something good. Do you spend your time in the ice world or in the tree world?
Tree world now, because I have a deadline. No choice. It's all so similar though. So I'm interviewing some of the same scientists. It's crazy between these 3 climate change books. There are repeat players. And I don't really have to choose because it is the same overwhelming thing happening up there that's creating all of this.
Let's say as a Vermonter though, as a Vermonter, if we want to move forward from this conversation.
Yeah.
Would we just try to plant more trees or maybe try to?
Oh, just start small.
Yeah.
Parking lot, whatever.
Yeah.
Solar first.
Yeah.
Just create as much solar as you possibly can. In New York, for many, many years, the incentives were just nuts. 0% loan, 30% federal rebate. We did it at our house. And we're not rich. We're like a writer and a photographer. We're scrapping for everything. But we pay so much less on our energy bill now, our electricity bill. We've split units and took all the furnace out and all that crap too. But overall, we're actually paying less per month than we did when we were on the fossil fuels. So it is possible. And so incentives like that, and you can do that locally. You can do solar incentives. And I love the charging station up the way here with the solar on top. Like there's just so many incredible, innovative things that are happening right now. And man, I wouldn't even start with Vermont. I would just start with like literally the parking lot right here. Like start very, very small. And these things tend to catch fire and the media catches on to it and suddenly it's a thing. I'm telling you, everyone around you will be so jealous. They'll just do it just so you don't have one up on them.
Yeah.
I want to raise the scale of the questions in terms of the whole planetary system around the sun. We're learning so much about the rest of the planets, the moons, Enceladus, Europa, and so on, out to the Kuiper Belt. And we know we're interested in why Venus became a hothouse instead of Earth. There are questions about why Mars lost all its water. And it seems to me that the research that is going on now with these amazing telescopes that we have can tell us a lot about Earth. And I guess the question is there a connection between climatology and planetary science and what we can learn from our neighbors?
100%. Because we're all in the Goldilocks zone here. We're all kind of facing the same challenges and whatnot. And believe it or not, most of the scientists I interviewed for the last winter that were working on glaciers were working on the Mars rover project that launched 4 years ago, I think it was. and are working on the next one. They are creating the ice drilling core machines for it. They are it's extremely cold on Mars. It's extremely cold on the glaciers. It makes sense that they test a lot of that stuff up in Juneau, Alaska, down in Antarctica. But they're really doing a lot of the same stuff there. So these laws of physics apply throughout the universe. And it's really interesting to see that even through the tree world, you see you're using some of the same formulas and terminology and whatnot. So they share a lot of data. They meet up a lot, and they're working on. The one issue with outer space is like this Elon Musk drive to like colonize other planets. To be perfectly honest, he really just wants to mine meteorites for valuable minerals. Like that's kind of the bottom line for a lot of that exploration. But for them anyway, their profit. But that is taking away from so much funding that could be used at NOAA, that could be used at NSF, which is just a shadow of its former self. They're just spending billions of dollars in the space exploration thing. So before, this is an old line, before we find another planet to inhabit, we should probably figure out how to inhabit this one first.
There's one more question. We can do that.
I'm not sure I should ask this question.
With an intro like that, we are dying to know.
Feel free to say, I don't want anything to do with it. What's the argument against climate change?
Against that it's not
That it
real.
doesn't exist, yeah.
It's hard to say it doesn't exist because
What do they say?
feeling it, but I would say like why it happened is sort of the backstory. And people are going to say it's natural fluctuation. You know, it's like natural oscillation of solar flares, of methane release, volcanic activity. And here's the catch, and this is such a typical thing in the age of Trump. It's partly true that before humans, like at the beginning of the talk, there was a lot of climate change. And it did happen because of, when Earth was a snowball covered in 5 miles of ice, wherever you were, except for parts of the equator, how did that snow melt? Because think of the solar, think of the albedo, the reflecting that solar radiation when the entire planet is white. You would think it would just get colder and colder and colder and that's it. But that's not what happened. There was volcanic eruptions that added huge amounts of CO2 into the air, which insulated the planet. And all of a sudden, things started thawing, things started whatever, that AMOC current started moving around the world again. And within 150, 200,000 years, we have jungles in South America and everything's kind of back to how it was. So there are natural fluctuations, but you have to overlay on that what humans have done since the Industrial Revolution. And you just have to accept that that was a similar field force as these other changes that we saw through time. And it's, a bit of a testament to us little tiny human beings that we had that big of an impact on our planet. But that's that's a hard one to argue in any other way. But that's what people will typically say is when I talk to folks that really don't want to believe. It's usually fear. I mean, fear is what kind of grips folks that can't accept that reality. Just say, well, it was natural at one point, but now it's anthropogenic.
But with Trump, it's greed.
Yeah, he just wants money.
It's just greed.
Yeah, it's so simple. It's sad and devastating, but it's easy to see the goal there.
Well, I want to say that one of the antidotes to so much of what ails us, I think, is modeled in this Mad River community. And it is community. As Trump thrives on division and fear. And when we see the people of Minneapolis standing up and protecting their neighbors and pushing back, I think this community has also demonstrated that at times of great fear and crisis, flood recovery, you've shown what it looks like to stay together. And I think that is our imperative right now, is to stay together, to forge these bonds of community that resist any effort to divide us. But I want to just thank Porter for braving a snowstorm. And Beth and Sam and Mad Arts for creating the space, a beautiful space. Thank you all for the team.
Thank you so much. Wow.
Completely smitten. So for